Welcome to Taranov's Geopolitics channel, and welcome to the podcast. Right now, something massive is shifting in Northern Europe, and it's bringing the world dangerously close to a direct clash between superpowers. Ukrainian drones just flew over 1,000 kilometers to strike deep inside Russia's second city, St. Petersburg, right under the noses of Western spy planes. This isn't just about a few exploding drones. It's a terrifying glimpse into how modern wars are actually won and lost using invisible data streams. Make sure you watch till the end of this video, because over the next few minutes, we are going to unpack exactly how these long-range strikes happened, why Moscow is completely furious at NATO's regular flight paths, and how the entire Baltic Sea is turning into a hyper-militarized powder keg. Trust me, the final piece of Taranov's analysis is something you absolutely cannot afford to miss. Let's look at the actual trigger event that has everyone in the Kremlin sweating. The most recent surge of Ukrainian drone attacks to target St. Petersburg has reignited a fierce debate within Russia regarding the role of NATO surveillance assets that operate over the Baltic region. Russian military analysts and several pro-Kremlin commentators have contended that NATO reconnaissance aircraft operating in international airspace may have indirectly supported Ukrainian strike operations. They say these planes are providing crucial situational awareness and intelligence coverage right in the vicinity of northwestern Russia. Although no public evidence has been released to demonstrate direct NATO involvement in controlling or guiding the attacks, the episode underscores the progressively ambiguous distinction between intelligence collection, military support, and direct participation in modern warfare. The timing of these explosions couldn't have been worse for Moscow's public relations team. The assaults on St. Petersburg transpired at a time that was particularly delicate for the government. As the annual St. Petersburg International Economic Forum was commencing, Ukrainian drones targeted military-related targets and infrastructure in the vicinity of Russia's second-largest city. While Ukrainian officials claimed effective strikes against energy and naval facilities, including assets in the Kronstadt area, Russian authorities reported multiple drone interceptions. The assaults resulted in localized damage, disrupted airport operations, and garnered substantial media attention, both domestically and internationally, according to reports from Reuters. Now, you might be wondering why a city so far from the actual front lines is suddenly a prime target. Well, St. Petersburg is situated in a distinctive strategic position, in sharp contrast to numerous Russian cities that are situated right near the Ukrainian frontier. It is the grand headquarters of the Russian Baltic Fleet, a significant naval hub, an important industrial center, and Russia's historic northern capital. Additionally, the city functions as one of Russia's primary entry points to the Baltic Sea and international maritime commerce. So, basically, hitting this place is a massive deal, both for hurting Russia's military pride and making regular people realize the war isn't just happening somewhere far away. Any successful assault against St. Petersburg is of symbolic as well as military significance due to its geographic location. 75s, the capacity to penetrate deep into Russian territory and challenge the notion that major urban centers far from the front lines remain insulated from the conflict is demonstrated by a drone attack that reaches the city. This brings us to the core strategy behind these high-stakes aerial operations. According to reports, the most recent strikes were directed at energy infrastructure and naval facilities, as part of a more comprehensive Ukrainian strategy that is designed to disrupt military logistics, petroleum supplies, and defense industrial capabilities that are located deep within Russia. Ukrainian officials have been increasingly referring to these operations as a campaign that is intended to impose costs on Russia that extend far beyond the battlefield. And that leads us directly to the big question. How are these drones navigating so far without getting jammed? Taranov's analysis is that you have to look closely at the NATO aircraft issue to find the real answer. NATO reconnaissance aircraft that operate over the Baltic Sea during periods of increased military activity have been the subject of particular attention by Russian commentators. NATO conducts surveillance, intelligence, and air policing missions in the region on a regular basis. These missions are typically conducted in international airspace and are deemed completely legal under international law. Let's break down exactly what these high-tech planes are actually doing up there in the clouds. Airborne early warning and control systems, often called AWACS, maritime patrol aircraft, electronic intelligence platforms, and other specialized reconnaissance assets may be utilized in the execution of such missions. Their responsibilities include the monitoring of military movements, the maintenance of situational awareness, and the support of NATO's broader defensive posture along its eastern flank. Russia contends that Ukraine may derive advantages from the information collected by these aircraft. Surveillance data may contribute to a more comprehensive intelligence picture that assists Ukrainian forces in comprehending Russian air defense patterns, naval deployments, or aircraft movements, even if NATO personnel are not directly engaged in mission planning or targeting. Western leaders, of course, tell a completely different story about these flights. Nevertheless, Western governments maintain that NATO is not a direct participant in combat operations and that reconnaissance missions are purely defensive in nature. NATO aircraft frequently observe Russian military activity in the Baltic region, and Russian military aircraft frequently operate in close proximity to NATO airspace and are monitored by alliance forces. But honestly, it's pretty obvious that this entire situation highlights a much bigger change in how modern wars are fought nowadays. The controversy is indicative of a more extensive transformation in the field of warfare. In the present day, military operations are becoming more reliant on information than on manpower and weapons. The success or failure of an operation is frequently determined by the intelligence collected by satellites, aircraft, drones, and electronic sensors. This information reliance completely blurs the lines of what it means to actually be at war with someone. The distinction between supplying intelligence and participating in combat can become politically contentious in contemporary conflicts. Real-time surveillance can assist in the identification of vulnerabilities, the monitoring of naval activity, the assessment of the efficacy of strikes after they have taken place, and the tracking of troop movements. Intelligence sharing has emerged as one of the most significant forms of Western support for Kyiv since the onset of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Western governments have consistently acknowledged their provision of intelligence assistance, despite the fact that the precise scope and operational details are still classified. All of this invisible data sharing creates a massive, complicated headache for Moscow's top generals. This presents a challenge for Russian strategists. The broader operational environment can still be influenced by intelligence collected through surveillance networks, even if no NATO aircraft directly guide a Ukrainian drone. This perception incites Moscow's apprehension that NATO reconnaissance activities effectively expand Ukrainian influence into regions that were previously regarded as relatively secure. Taranov's analysis is that this anxiety is exactly what is turning the Baltic Sea into a high-risk strategic arena. The Baltic Sea has become one of the most militarized and closely monitored regions in Europe. NATO has expanded its surveillance, air policing operations, maritime patrols, and intelligence collection efforts in the region since the outbreak of the conflict in Ukraine. The alliance has initiated initiatives to enhance situational awareness and fortify security in the vicinity of critical infrastructure. These endeavors have been driven by apprehensions regarding drone activity, underwater infrastructure incidents, sabotage, and broader regional instability, as noted by Reuters. The Baltic region poses numerous vulnerabilities for Russia. An environment that is becoming increasingly monitored encompasses naval facilities, ports, energy infrastructure, St. Petersburg, and Kaliningrad. Surveillance platforms can monitor substantial portions of Russian military activity without penetrating Russian airspace due to the close proximity of NATO member states. This geographical reality leaves Moscow with very few good options to protect its northern flank. Moscow is faced with a persistent intelligence challenge as a result of this reality. Even the most sophisticated air defense systems are unable to prevent foreign aircraft from accumulating information while operating legally in international airspace. This brings us straight to the most terrifying part of the whole situation, which is the immediate risk of a sudden, accidental escalation. Pressure for a more aggressive response could intensify if Russia determines that NATO surveillance assets are actively facilitating attacks on Russian territory. Attempts to disrupt reconnaissance operations, increased electronic warfare activity, or more assertive military maneuvers in international airspace are potential responses. When you have heavily armed jets playing chicken in the dark, things can go wrong incredibly fast. Miscalculation is the potential hazard. NATO and Russian military aircraft are currently operating in close proximity over the Baltic Sea. Interceptions and surveillance missions are conducted on a regular basis. Tensions could be rapidly exacerbated by a technical malfunction, excessively aggressive maneuver, or misunderstanding. NATO fighters have been compelled to intercept Russian aircraft in close proximity to alliance airspace on numerous occasions in recent years, while Russian forces conduct routine surveillance of NATO flights near their borders. As the operational environment becomes more congested, the likelihood of an incident involving military aircraft from opposing factions increases, according to reports from Euronews. Beyond the pilot standoffs, we are also witnessing a rapid evolution of the drone threat itself. The increasing sophistication of long-range drone warfare is another critical lesson to be learned from the St. Petersburg attacks. Ukraine has exhibited the capacity to strike targets that are hundreds of kilometers, and occasionally over 1,000 kilometers, from the front line. Advancements in drone range, navigation systems, communications, and autonomous capabilities have expanded the set of prospective targets available to Ukrainian planners. To counter this, Russia has poured a ton of money into electronic warfare and layered defenses, but it's like trying to stop rain with a net when they send dozens of drones all at once. Concurrently, Russia has made substantial investments in electronic warfare capabilities and multi-layered air defense systems. The vast number of drones involved in certain attacks can complicate interception efforts and create opportunities for individual drones to achieve their objectives, despite these efforts. Russia is not the only country facing this challenge. NATO countries have also expressed growing apprehension regarding drone threats. Discussions regarding the enhancement of counter-drone defenses and the extension of surveillance networks throughout Eastern Europe have been initiated in response to drone incursions into alliance airspace. These shifting threats are forcing a massive rewrite of Russia's security strategy. The attacks on St. Petersburg may serve as an incentive for Russia to enhance its air defenses in the vicinity of significant cities, strategic infrastructure, and naval facilities. It is probable that a greater emphasis will be placed on the detection of low-flying drones approaching from unconventional directions, electronic warfare, and early warning systems. Additionally, Russian planners may allocate additional resources to oversee NATO reconnaissance operations in the Baltic region. Russia's capacity to interfere with aircraft operating in international airspace is restricted by international law. However, it is reasonable to anticipate that Moscow will continue to closely monitor these missions and emphasize them in public statements. Looking at the bigger picture, this whole situation shows that distance doesn't really protect you anymore in modern conflicts. Taranov's analysis is that the episode emphasizes the diminishing significance of geography in the context of persistent surveillance and long-range drones. Intelligence collected hundreds of kilometers away can influence events on the ground in near real time, while cities that were previously considered distant from the battlefield are becoming increasingly vulnerable to attack. In conclusion, the debate concerning NATO aircraft and the recent drone assaults on St. Petersburg is indicative of the evolving nature of contemporary warfare. The increasing significance of intelligence, reconnaissance, and information dominance in contemporary conflicts is underscored by the presence of NATO surveillance platforms, regardless of whether they directly supported Ukrainian operations. Ultimately, the game has completely changed for the Russian military command. Simply preserving frontline positions is no longer the primary challenge for Russia. It is safeguarding critical infrastructure, military facilities, and significant urban centers from threats that may originate in locations that are not conventional battlefields. The strategic competition in the Baltic region is expected to intensify as drone technology continues to advance and intelligence networks become more integrated. Consequently, the St. Petersburg attacks are not merely a singular military operation. They demonstrate a more extensive transformation in the conflict, in which surveillance aircraft, intelligence networks, drones, and electronic warfare are becoming just as significant as tanks, ships, and missiles in determining the future of European security. If you like this podcast, please like, subscribe and share.